From the studio that has won no awards whatsoever comes the podcast that should have already been canceled. Welcome to another episode of Have You Read This? A podcast for bookworms, lovers of sarcasm, and those dangerously close to overdosing on caffeine. Load up on ibuprofen, because here comes 15 minutes of your life you'll never be able to get back.
This episode is brought to you by absolutely nobody whatsoever. Because who in their right mind would sponsor this crap?
Recently, I asked my daughter, I guess it was a while back, about these book haul videos that you see online. And I was like, hey, what do you think about these? Because honestly, I don't care to watch those. I don't want to watch a video about a stack of books that someone bought but hasn't read yet. I don't care why you bought it. I only really care to know what you thought about it after you read it. But she said she enjoys the book haul videos because it kind of gives her an idea of what somebody's buying. Like, okay, I like this person, I like their reviews, and they bought this, so maybe I'll go check it out. So this episode's kind of a mix between that, because I'm going to talk about several books. However, I'm only going to talk about ones that I've read, not ones that I've bought and stuck on the shelf somewhere. So we were recently on vacation, and I just wanted to make sure I had plenty of books on deck, and I knew I was going to have a lot of time to be disconnected from work and disconnected from social media, and I wanted to really read as much as I possibly could. And really, it shouldn't take much to want to disconnect from social media. I mean, I saw a meme the other day about the top 4 TikTok dances you could do to fight tariffs. And to me, it's really just another sign that the apocalypse is one day closer. Anyway, I rolled through 6 books while I was gone, and I had great luck with the ones that I picked because none of them sucked. Thought about making some kind of comment along the lines of just being so skilled at selecting only the finest novels by only the finest authors. But we all know that I don't deserve that much credit. And I'm not sure what you all do on vacation, but my preference really now is to load up my Kindle because I don't want to carry a stack of books around. It's just so much easier to put as many things as possible on that Kindle and just carry that around. So much easier to transport. And I tried to do that as best as I could. However, the first book that I read while I was out of town, it was one that I had a physical copy of, so kind of didn't have a choice. It was kind of in the middle of it, and I'm going to count it anyway. So this was 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult, and this was a book that I bought for one reason, and really one reason only, and that was because it was at the top of the 2024 list of receiving the most bans from school. And if you want me to read a book, just tell me it's been banned a bunch of times, and that alone will do the trick. I didn't know much about this one, basically went into it blind, and it doesn't take long at all before you realize that the story centers around a shooting at a high school. And I found this is very emotionally heavy. It was a very weighted story. I can't think of any other way to describe a book about an event like this, honestly. And the story is told using a then now timeline, and I think it jumps around a bit. Like at one point, you're years before, then months after, then days before, then days after. And it kind of took me a bit to get used to, but thankfully it didn't take too long before I kind of figured everything out. And I say another thing that I guess has initially frustrated me with what felt like a massive influx of characters, and just like Joe Biden and teleprompters, I was worried if I could keep up because I ain't getting any younger, folks. The story is fleshed out and it progresses into these gut-wrenching backstories surrounding the whole school shooting thing. I think what I like the most is that all sides of this are explored. And I think that that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. It's going to challenge what you might know, what you might believe. I'm not at all suggesting that she's using this book to make an excuse for somebody doing something like this. in many ways, I thought this was really similar to reading Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry, where you have this horrific event, but it's discussed from all points of view, especially those that you don't normally get a look into. And as you might expect, the further you go into the book, the deeper dive into all the characters and the darker it gets. You think you know, but you really don't. I can understand why the thing was banned in schools. I get it. Like, I don't think, everybody should be able to go to their school library and pick out something like this. I don't know where I sit on the book banning subject. I'd love to hear from people that are anti bans. I think that would be a cool perspective to learn from. Can also see why these topics, especially what lies underneath them, should be discussed, because it's a difficult subject, but it's a really, really important one. I think, I can't remember if I gave this 5 stars or 4. It was one of those. Really good. He kept my interest. And I would say, if you read this and you like it, the book that I would suggest to read would be, like I mentioned earlier, Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. Columbine is an excellent book. That one I can't ever recommend enough. And even A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. And I think I did an episode on that, last year. Who knows? I don't know anything at this point. Next was Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. And it's one of those books that I think I've seen this thing like everywhere. And I can identify it by the cover alone, which is kind of weird. Like, you've seen a book so many times that you've never read, but you know it on sight. And I think most of you have probably seen it. Like, those of you especially haven't read it, I'm sure you've seen it. The cover is like this skeleton wearing what looks like a uniform shirt, and I guess it's like the security guard kind of thing. And to me, it looks like the skeleton's laughing. The skeleton's holding some flowers, and off to the left, there's like a swarm of roaches. So it's really pleasant, right? And I went into this thing blind, but I had enough of an idea that was graphic, but I didn't know just how graphic it was because to me, that's such a spectrum. Sometimes people say, wow, this thing was just so graphic. And I read it and I'm like, okay, well, that was bad, but I've definitely read worse. So I think it depends on your own perspective as to where these things fall on the scale of things. And if you listen to my episode about Haig, you'll know at one point I decided that book was enough to make me end my search for the most dark and disturbing books ever written. I really had no desire at all to read anything under the splatterpunk umbrella, especially after reading Haig. I was like, that's it. I'm done. Which means I should have done more research before reading this one. However, I'm probably more stubborn than I am stupid. That's debatable. And it takes a lot for me to DNF a book. I will struggle through it and just to get to the end, because I just hate DNFing books. If you're on the fence about this one, there are the obvious splatterpunk elements blended with, I think, elements from the necrophiliac and even a small sampling from a Serbian film. That should be enough of a warning. And if you haven't watched a Serbian film, don't. It's just a movie that nobody needs in your head. Those are visuals that you just cannot unsee. And it's weird. Those two stories came to mind while I was reading this. Okay, but what is this about, though? Like, really? Well, the story follows this young hospital security guard, and he has a disturbingly unique taste in women, and a maternity doctor with a horrifically unusual appetite. Okay. I mean, you can kind of see where this is going. And that's what the synopsis tells you. So the security guard, he prefers sex with dead women. And I'm not going to tell you what the doctor likes, because you just need that shock all on your own. I'm not going to give that to you here. It's not pleasant. Anyway, these two meet by chance and they develop this really awkward relationship, and it spirals. Swarms the drain. I don't know. Spirals to levels of depravity into the deepest levels possible. I don't know how else to say it. I don't say that lightly either. I say that as somebody who has read and watched some of the most vile stories possible. This one was tough to stomach. I don't know if it's worse than Hog. I'd say Hog overall was very graphic through the majority of the book. This one is extremely graphic, but the entire book isn't filled with it. It just has its moments. So they're different, kind of the same. That doesn't help, but nothing that I talk about here does. So I guess we're all kind of used to that by now. Had it not been for the superb and dark sarcasm, I would have rated this a lot lower. To marry the subject matter with an equally dark amount of humor and sarcasm, I think is bold, but it really works so well. I found that was part of what kept pushing the story forward, other than my own morbid curiosity. There's a unique bond between the two main characters of the story as they find themselves united in these taboo desires that they have. At no part of this story did I expect what was about to happen. It's sad, disgusting, dark, extremely violent, and enters a realm of storytelling that should make just about anyone and everyone uncomfortable. That being said, I do think it was well done. It isn't one of those books that I'm going to recommend to the average person, maybe unless I don't like them, but it was good. I can't imagine bumping into somebody and like, hey, what's a book that you read recently that was really good? Like, oh, you should check out Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. You kind of got to feel somebody out before you throw them into the deep end of the pool like this. And, when I was done, I was trying to decide, did I like the ending or not? And I had to let it sit for like a day or so. I just don't see how else it could have ended that would have been better than what Chandler did with this. So to me, it was good. It's if you can get through the graphicness of it and kind of wrap your head around something else, I think this was a worthwhile book. I don't think it's deserving of what I would say is lower ratings on some of these sites. And if you read this, you want some suggestions that are exactly like it, my first recommendation would be to go talk to a therapist. And then after that, I don't know, The Necrophiliac by Gabrielle Whitcop. It's probably the only thing that comes to mind. Next up was Allegedly by Tiffany Jackson. And this one was, thankfully, nowhere near as graphic as the previous book. And unlike anything involving Kanye West, this is actually worth paying attention to. In one of these Facebook groups that I belong to, and it's the one that I complain about all the time, I saw a post saying to stop recommending this book because it was trash. And I just kind of got a kick out of that. And when I saw that, I thought, well, now I got to read it, because if one of these idiots thinks it's terrible, it's probably a good book. And that is the only thing that made me go get this book. The main character, Mary Addison, is a black teenager who allegedly killed a 3-month-old baby when she was only 9. And this baby girl, Alyssa, she was left in the care of Mary and her mentally ill mother. But when Alyssa's parents come back that night, Alyssa was heavily bruised and no longer breathing. And so you fast forward to the present, and Mary she's been transferred from what she calls a baby jail to a group home. The story unfolds more from Mary's point of view, and it's in her language, which I feel adds power to it. Readers also get glimpses of the past from things like there's excerpts from like police reports, book snippets, because there's apparently a lot of books written about her case, interviews, and articles. And along the way, you learn that Mary is extremely smart, despite everyone around her thinking she is the opposite. They all think that she's stupid because she decides not to talk a lot. And she starts to work to take her SATs because she wants to get into college, even after she finds out she's pregnant. The powers that be decide, well, the baby's going to be given up for adoption. Mary's a ward of the state, so they have control of it. And that's when she begins to make plans to keep the baby. This was a really fast read for me, what the young folk like to call a real page turner. There were a lot of twists and turns, and the ending was not at all what I was expecting, which really made this one worth it. So the lady that said we need to stop suggesting this should probably just stick to complaining on Nextdoor and quit telling people what books are good or not, because I liked it. Fast pace, Great dialogue, revealed just enough information, it kept the story moving, had a good twist at the end. Really, really good read for me. A similar story, though more graphic, that came to mind was the book Push, which was later turned into the movie Precious. So if you like Allegedly, maybe check that one out. Ironically, that book is even mentioned within this one. On our trip, when we got to the condo, I found 2 books sitting on the entertainment center. One of them was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And since my TBR is too out of control to ever recall everything that I've ever put on it, I scanned this with Goodreads and I realized, hey, this is already on my TBR, had high reviews. So I thought, hey, why not read this one? The main character, Nora, is struggling with life. I think that's the best way to put it. Maybe put it mildly. Like, she's lost her job. She's depressed. She feels like she has a life full of regrets. She probably thinks that Starbucks is the best coffee. I mean, she's got like all the wrong things happening to her. In her mind, there is no real reason to continue. And then she finds herself in the Midnight Library. And I'm trying to be vague with some of this stuff because I feel like some of these details you kind of need to read on your own. I don't want to give it all away. And I hope when you find some of this stuff, you don't read too much about the book before reading the book itself, because it's more fun to discover it as you go. It's in this library where Nora is allowed to select a different book for her life. She can live a different life by making different decisions, hopefully removing past regrets. I mean, this sounds great. Imagine being handed a list of all of your regrets and then given a chance to go through one by one and see what would happen if you've made a different choice. I think we've all probably thought to some degree or another about being able to do something like that. And I've seen critiques of this book stating that it was just full of cliches and that some felt it minimized the impact of depression, as if it was just easy to snap out of it and then all of a sudden be happy with everything that's around you. Anyone with depression knows that isn't the case. And I haven't talked about this like a whole heck of a lot, but I guess a little over a year ago, I was diagnosed with depression and was actually told I was in a deep recurring depressive episode, which, nobody really wants to hear that, right? Thankful for therapy and medication. With all of that, I never read this book thinking the author was trying to minimize depression or how that you could just instantly snap out of it and your surroundings have no impact on you. What I did take away, though, from this book was a beautiful story about perspectives. Imagine all of us at some point have wondered how life would be different had we made a single different choice in the past. There's been times where I've wondered how my path might have changed. What if I had the foresight to say, you know what, I'm going to get straight A's all through school, all through college? What if I pursued a different degree? Would that have led me to a different career? Would I be making, twice the money? Would I be happier? And I think you could beat yourself to death thinking like this. What this book offered me, what I felt like, it was hope in that being on my path is okay and that the grass is not always greener on the other side. I really loved the atmosphere and the storytelling here. There were short chapters. If you know me, I love short chapters. It's so much easier for me to stay focused that way. But they carried me along, and I just really found this a wonderful and quick read. And I was not upset about it at all. In fact, I think when I was done, it really left me feeling happy and hopeful. Next up is The Glassy Burning Floor of Hell by Brian Evenson. That's a great title, isn't it? So I read Father of Lies by Evenson, and I thought it was horrific. And I mean that in a good way, not like how the Fast and Furious series has been drug out. Evenson's writing, I just have really enjoyed what little bit I have been exposed to of it. The synopsis I felt like was spot on when it said, combining psychological and ecological horror, each tale thrums with Evenson's award-winning literary craftsmanship, dark humor, and thrilling suspense. I should probably end it there because that really sums it up. But for those that don't know, this is a really short book. It's around 250 pages. And I guess there's probably some people out there who'll say, well, this isn't a book at all. It's just a collection of short stories. I mean, who cares what you call it? It's a book and it's a collection of short stories. Get over it. I'm not really a fan of reading collections of short stories. And I wish I could tell you why. It's just how I am. It's just like, I guess it's a personal preference. However, after I read Father of Lies, I think I went back to his author profile and put everything of his on my TBR. The Glassy Burning Floor of Hell was not only available, but it has such a cool title that I just couldn't pass it up. Aren't you at least curious when you see the Glassy Burning Floor of Hell? You got to read that, right? The overwhelming majority of the stories are excellent. And I'm serious when I say that. There's a few that I kind of glazed over as they didn't stand out as much to me, but man, this was a really interesting read. I might even go so far as to say I would read more short stories solely because of this one. When I was done reading, I had mixed emotions about it because on one hand, I felt like all you get as a reader here is like a teaser of what should be a much more in-depth and lengthy story. So many of these things could be turned into full novels. And I was like, why are we only getting this little bitty piece of a story here? Like, why can't we have the full thing? And I think that's what I had such a hard time with. I wanted more out of so many of these. They were just that good. However, the flip side is knowing that many of these stories, as abbreviated as I might have found them, potentially pack more of a punch because of that. I think what you get with this is you get a series of really excellent jabs rather than one single knockout swing at the end. I would say definitely if you're a fan of horror or psychological type stuff, you have to go read this one. All right, the final one on this roundup. And I know you're like, thank God, get me out of here. Once Gone by Blake Pierce. This is a thriller novel that has Silence of the Lambs type vibes. In fact, if you like Silence of the Lambs, I can't see how you wouldn't enjoy this one too. This story follows FBI agent Riley Page, where we find her on paid leave after her last case that involved a serial killer. This, if you're sitting down, this may come as a shock. There is another serial killer on the loose, y'all. This one's targeting women, I think like the outskirts of Virginia somewhere. And naturally, Riley Page is the only person in FBI with the ability to really hunt down these monsters. I think if you describe it that way, I could see like, okay, this is just a typical kind of crappy story. And yeah, I get it. If I word it that way, it doesn't sound great. Anyway, Riley Page, her paid leave is cut short. They drag her out of that, and she begins to track down the serial killer while at the same time fighting her own demons. I saw this one labeled as a dark psychological thriller with heart-pounding suspense. I don't know about the heart-pounding part. Maybe if you drink enough caffeine, you could probably get there, but I will say this was fast-paced. I didn't feel like I was picking up my heart rate necessarily, but it is super short. I think it's just over 200 pages. And I read the whole thing in the car on the way home. I really liked this book. I thought it was great because it wasn't extremely deep. It was just enough. Like if you're like, you know what, I just want a really good book that I don't want to put down. This is it for me. There were a few technicalities in the book that I had a hard time with. Kind of brought back memories of Clarice Starling, Silence of the Lambs, when she goes into that home by herself. There was some stuff like this. I'm like, okay, that wouldn't happen in real life. But I also get needing to keep the suspense high, so I'm not going to complain too terribly much. There wasn't so much of that I was like, oh, it just detracts from the book. This thing is garbage now. It was still done very well. And I think I also liked it because it was short and didn't get too deep into the characters. Look, I don't need their medical history and what person was mean to them in the 4th grade and the story behind their 6th grade birthday party and the ribbon their dad gave them. I don't need all of that crap. Give me just enough to know the character on some level and then push the story forward. This book did that very well. I guess as I got into this one, I enjoyed it enough to look up the author, see what all I could find. I had never heard of Blake Pierce before. I don't know even how this book showed up on my radar. Honestly, I might have just been scrolling Libby looking for books that were available to check out from the library. Oddly enough, the Blake Pierce bio and website is extremely vague, and it's vague every single spot that I found it. Normally, you get at least some kind of artsy bio photo of the author and a short paragraph about their dog or cat, and maybe, hey, they live here. Not with this one. And I figured maybe, okay, they just don't update their website. I get it. Some folks focus more on writing rather than some of the marketing and all the accessory stuff that comes with it. Totally get that. But while I was looking, I found a suggestion. I think this was on Reddit, that Blake Pierce is not a real person at all. Turns out there isn't much public information about good old Blake. Google even told me, no, Blake Pierce, the author of the Riley Page mystery series, is not a real person, but rather a pen name or pseudonym used by a collective of ghostwriters. So does that change my mind about the book? Absolutely not. It's just something I thought I would bore the 4 of you that are still listening. So that's the vacation roundup. I did end up going to a bookstore while I was out of town, but didn't buy anything. And I know that's a shock. That's probably twice in my life that that's happened. Turns out we got there 5 minutes before they closed, and might have been a good thing for our wallet, because I'm pretty sure I would have walked out with a stack of books that I could come home and put on the shelf next to all of the other books that I have yet to read. One goal on the horizon here is to connect with authors and chat with them here on the podcast. If you're an author or know someone that is, and you're into talking about your work, let's connect. You can email me at reviews@haveyoureadthispodcast.com. In the meantime, head over to the website, click on store, and go buy some crap. Until next time.